This is the title of a report that I found from a consultancy company that works in the space of what's probably known as the sharing economy. I think in the kind of B2C internet. And I put this up there partly just to kind of get everybody going a little bit, and partly to wake you up, because I hope that we do actually agree that in many contexts in our industry and in our community that sharing is good. It's good for scholars. It's good for scholarship, and so it's an inherent part of scholarship. So let me just make that completely clear from the beginning. I think we're all on the same page there. But I wanted to draw an analogy, really, with this phenomenon of what we're calling the sharing economy. So first of all, I was going to ask, well, who has used Uber or Lyft or Airbnb? Can we have a quick show of hands there? Okay, so we've got about 40%, I guess, 30–40% of the I can say we're probably all familiar with these brands. They're often kind of touted as success stories for what's called in some quarters disruptive innovation. Whether you believe that that's kind of survivor bias or actually true or not is another issue, which we don't need to go into right now. But these businesses, in my mind anyway, often exist effectively on legal margins. They're bending the rules, and they're using the scale that internet business gives you in order to force their agendas through, effectively. And you might ask me, well, why is this relevant, Richard? And I think that's a good question. It is a fairly straightforward answer. Some of the scholarly collaboration networks, which I'll come on to in a moment, are very self-consciously using this agenda or this labeling to label their own businesses. And so, we do have, I think, we have a sharing economy in our own industry, and it's the scholarly collaboration network. So I was going to ask another question. Out of the big three scholarly collaboration networks, ResearchGate and Academia.edu, and I can't remember what the third one is, Fred. Mendeley, thank you, sorry. And of course, I should have remembered that. Slipped my mind temporarily. Who's got an account on one of those services? Okay, maybe we got 20% or so there. So they're growing, I think, is one thing that is worth saying. First of all, according to, and some of these statistics are, a little bit subject to interpretation, which I think, there are some valid questions about them. But, maybe in the order of 15 million articles that are uploaded into these networks in aggregate. To kind of put that into context, let's just remember that, in Crossref we have around about 77 million DOIs registered. So, as an overall percentage of, what might be considered to be available digitally already, we're talking quite a significant percentage there. In terms of how many members, they're claiming at least that there are 40 million members, that they've got registered. And again, contextualizing that, yesterday I think we heard that in ORCID we have around about 1.8 million ORCIDs that are registered now. Maybe it's around about that figure. So again, now we have to take these figures with a pinch of salt. There's, for starters, how many of those are actually active members, and so on. There is also an unusual disparity between some of the networks which claim to have huge numbers of members, but much smaller amount of content, and vice versa. So there's some reason to kind of question those figures a little bit. But they're the figures that we have at the moment. So yes, I think we can all agree, though, regardless of whether we want to pick them apart or not, these networks are growing, and they're growing very, very quickly. So, well, we need to understand what the principal functions of these networks are in order to decide, in order to enter into our debate properly. Well, do they add or remove value? What are the functions? Well, clearly, and I've taken these functions and sort of reprioritized them a little bit according to my own perspective here. I think, the obvious function that we need to look at, first of all, is about sharing. And it's not just about sharing of articles, it's about sharing of results and data, although, I think the emphasis might be more in one place than the other, and we all had a good debate yesterday about how important sharing data was, so I won't kind of go too far into that. There's a second aspect, which I think, again, is important here too. This is about the ability to actually discuss and exchange information around those topics. Third down, it's a similar, related thing. Again, this is about discovery, it's about discoverability within that domain. There's probably one other thing I would add here too, and this is just as, from a, kind of maybe just having reflected on this myself, which is, so I signed up to ResearchGate. There's a kind of vanity, what I call vanity factor involved here too, which is actually, it kind of strokes your ego every time it tells you that someone's read your paper, or that every time it tells you that someone cited your paper. And I wouldn't underestimate that, actually. I think that that's an extremely powerful hook. It might not be seen as a kind of principal function, but in terms of the sort of drip feed of the kind of drug that keeps you going, I think it's in there. So, well, what have we been doing as a community about this? I'm going to ask Fred to explain this in a little bit more detail in a minute. But as a community, we've gotten together and gone through a very extensive consultation exercise and come up with some voluntary principles. I won't attempt to go those into detail. That'll be for Fred in just a moment. And I think it's a very constructive response. It's something that Fred can come right now, actually, and tell us, because this is our question. I don't need to go on any more detail now. I think we've got some really important aspects here. One thing I have to say, though, before everybody sort of decides that they've just had a nice breakfast and they had lots of wine and beer last night, is I need questions, okay? And I need questions from everybody here, because in order for this to be a really good debate, we need engagement. And so, having said that,
very good. Flip back to your last slide.
Yeah. So, Fred, I will welcome Fred to the stand. Sorry, I haven't introduced you properly. Fred obviously was introduced yesterday. President Emeritus, is that correct?
Yes.
Of American Institute of Physics. Fred, kick us off by giving us a précis of the STM principle.